Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another Entitled Parents Reddit video. In our first story, it's the time a couple of my employees were extremely mad. Let's jump right in. This happened a couple years ago, but I randomly was thinking about it and thought you guys might get a kick out of the ridiculousness. I had this employee who was a woman in her late 30s or early 40s, and was your stereotypical momby. I'm a good deal younger than her, and at the time I was like 26 or 27. Right away it became clear that she had an issue answering to a woman much younger than her. She talked back a lot and made it clear she felt like she knew more than me and shouldn't have to listen to me when she disagreed. She would frequently bring up the fact I had no kids and she had 4 to disregard my management abilities as if it was in any way relevant. Here's just a couple anecdotes of what I regularly dealt with from her. We had a problem with employees being on their phones excessively, her being one of the worst offenders. I did an employee meeting where I reminded everyone they weren't allowed to be on their phones at all, and we would be a lot more strict about that moving forward. She interrupted my speech to say, "Well, the problem is your generation can't handle being off their phones for more than 2 minutes." I pointed out she was on her phone all the time too, and her reply was, "It's different. When I'm on my phone, I'm looking at things for my kids, not trying to hook up on Tinder or play Candy Crush." I told her the reason people were on their phones didn't matter, unless it was an actual emergency, and she rolled her eyes. She tried to argue with me about the fact I would only schedule her during the day and not nights. Nights are more lucrative because customers buy more alcoholic drinks, thus higher tips. I reminded her that when she took the job, she was signing up specifically for day shifts, and most of my waitresses are college students and have class during the day, so there's not any flexibility with their scheduling requirements. She proceeded to yell at me that her desires should trump theirs because she's a mom and she needs more money than them, and slammed my office door shut behind her when I wouldn't cave. The final straw was that I heard from one of my waitresses, who I am very close to, about how she would talk about how she didn't respect me as a manager and often brought up my lack of desire for kids. She would also apparently say things like, "I'm not going to take orders from someone who hasn't even matured past the 'I don't want kids' phase." Between the constant blatant disrespect and the fact she was barely a passable waitress anyway, I decided to fire her. 2 waitresses confronted me, telling me it was wrong of me to fire her, and begged me to give her her job back. They had no defense for her crappiness, only she has 4 kids. If she has 4 kids dependent on her, it's on her that she repeatedly treated her boss like total crap. It's not like I fired her over one incident. There were countless incidences of horrid behavior and blatant disregard for authority that she openly and shamelessly stated was rooted in the ageism and my maternal status. So yeah, it's a shame that her kids had to suffer for their mom's behavior, but that's her responsibility, and I have no regrets for throwing out the trash. In story 2, an entitled mother demands I give her ice cream from the bottom of a pallet. So another work-related entitled parent story. This happened before the current world events. I work at a supermarket, and one day I had to fill our freezers with ice cream that was on sale. I want to say the sale was something like $1.88 for half a gallon of ice cream, so when I started the shelves were nearly bare. Shortly after I had brought the pallet out, a woman started inspecting the pallet, and after a few minutes she must have spotted what she wanted and went, "Excuse me, miss, could you get me 2 cartons of that Mocha Cookie Crunch?" She then points to a case at the bottom corner of the pallet. "It's the only flavor my kids will eat." I groaned. The pallet I was working was a full pallet, so each stack was roughly 4 feet high, and as with most full pallets of ice cream, the cases, which are 6 cartons wrapped in plastic, aren't simply stacked one on top of the other. Nope, they're stacked in an alternating pattern similar to how a Jenga game tower is stacked. And because the flavor she wanted was at the top corner of the pallet, for safety reasons, I wouldn't be able to just shimmy 2 cartons out from the case. I would have to disassemble a good quarter of the pallet. I turned to the meager amount of ice cream we had on the shelf, silently praying for a miracle. Mocha Cookie Crunch was one of the most popular flavors, and the retail guardian angels were looking out for me that day. I had not one, but 2 cartons of Mocha Cookie Crunch sitting on the shelf. So I take them out and told her, I actually have 2 cartons of that flavor on the shelf. The woman looked at the 2 cartons sitting in the freezer and said, I don't know how long those 2 cartons have been sitting there. I want 2 fresh cartons off the pallet. So I took a deep breath, preparing for the inevitable explosion, and told her, no, you get the cartons off the shelf or you get another flavor. She shrieked a shrill, excuse me? And I repeated myself, you either get the 2 I have in the freezer or you get another flavor. I'm not going to disassemble the pallet, nor am I going to shimmy 2 cartons free and risk having the pallet collapse on me or another customer. Without another word, the woman stomped off. A few minutes later, she returned to the aisle with the evening manager in tow. The manager said, OP, this customer said you weren't going to get something for her. What is that all about? So I told him, she wants 2 cartons of Mocha Cookie Crunch, which I have on the shelf, but she doesn't want those. She wants 2 cartons off the bottom of the pallet. The manager turned to the customer and asked her, is that true? The customer stammered out a, well, I don't know how fresh those cartons are. I want fresh product. The manager then said, ma'am, you either get the 2 we have in the freezer or you get something off the top layer of the pallet. For safety reasons, I can't let my employee disassemble the pallet on the sales floor. The woman huffed and grabbed the 2 cartons of the Mocha Cookie Crunch out of the freezer and stormed off without another word. Once she was gone, my manager turned to me, muttered an unfrickin' real, then walked away. In story number 3, an entitled aunt can't help stealing the attention from her sibling. So this happened before I was born, so this is entirely hearsay, but I 100% believe it knowing my aunt. My dad's side of the family has always been toxic in so many ways, including my dad himself, whom I made a post about on r/insane parents about the time he intentionally left my 6-year-old sister at the Grand Canyon back in the 90s, so yeah, not the most rational group of people. My aunt ended up with 3 children, all very close in age. Now I know why. My parents decided to get married in 1990, at which point my entitled aunt suddenly fell pregnant. Okay, it happens, no big deal. Except, upon my parents' wedding day, my entitled aunt was in the hospital ready to give birth. Their wedding tape consisted of multiple family members only fixating on my entitled aunt's pregnancy, including my grandmother, my dad's own mother, never mind the wedding that was currently taking place. If that's where it ended, I wouldn't be writing this. A year after this, my uncle got engaged to a lovely woman, let's call her Simone. Simone adored my uncle, but she hated his side of the family, often referring to them as a toxic cult, only to my mother who hated them too. When my uncle revealed when they planned to get married, in about 10 months' time, my entitled aunt spoke up and was like, I'll probably be giving birth at that time. My uncle pointed out, you're not even pregnant. She boasted, but I will be. He brushed her off, but of course, she just ran out and got pregnant, timed it just right so that she would be very close to bursting by the time the wedding came around. Simone noped the flip out of it. Knowing how my father's wedding became all about my entitled aunt's pregnancy, Simone convinced my uncle to postpone the wedding. He agreed, and it was done. My entitled aunt got all pissy that Simone was overreacting, as she just wanted her baby's birth to be extra special. But Simone was firm about her decision. She just wanted her wedding day to be about their union and nothing else. Unfortunately, their relationship fell apart not long after that, and their wedding never happened. Maybe they would have gotten divorced early, but my immediate family believes that if my entitled aunt didn't ruin the initial wedding plan with her obsessive attention grabbing, they might still be together today. So where does entitled aunt's 3rd child come in then? Well, it was to compete with me. My mother got pregnant with me around November 1992. It was announced to the family a few months later. My entitled aunt got to work and got pregnant as soon as possible after hearing the news. It took a little while this time, but she did it. Both me and my cousin were born in 1993. Luckily, this didn't really interfere with anything this time. The most she did with this was to pit us against each other because we were in the same school year, who had the higher VCE score, etc., just as she had done with my older sister and her eldest daughter 2 years prior. This isn't even mentioning the time my entitled aunt took my mother's car while she was in the hospital hemorrhaging during the pregnancy of my older sister, and she refused to give it back. My mother was in rough shape, she was already thin as a stick, and my sister would not stop kicking her while in the womb, causing my mother to just bleed out. She looked and felt like death, as there wasn't a whole lot the medical staff could do other than use sedatives to calm the baby. My entitled aunt came in to see her only for a few minutes, acting all sympathetic about her situation, until she asked about needing her car. "You're in the hospital, you don't need it." My mother was pretty out of it, but she's convinced she didn't even agree. My entitled aunt just took the keys and left. My mother didn't hear from her again for weeks. My dad had to go and fetch the car from her because she wouldn't willingly give it back, even after my mother got discharged from the hospital. "Can't you just buy another one?" My mother has hated her ever since. Yeah, I don't speak to these people often. This is John from Slashbash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see more of them, then hit that subscribe button. We would love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.